Hey everybody, welcome back to Truth Revealed. I'm your host, Sergio Denaro. I'm a former human intelligence collector and a retired federal agent. Today we are going to finish off the Seth Kenney witness testimony. This is our fourth video. This has been a great analysis. Let's just wrap this up and see if we can make everything come together and get that nice big picture that we're looking for in the end here. The third video was a bit of a bombshell. As I was looking through the cross-examination testimony from Seth Kenney, I was able to identify when he uses the term that is an indicator of extreme emotional distress for him. Deception follows the phrase but not just deception, it's also extreme emotion. As soon as I had that information, I was able to pull all of those sentences and phrases that contain out and analyze them individually. Because of that, we were able to determine that he did, in fact, premeditate bringing live rounds and mixing them in with the dummy rounds. Let's jump in and take a look here. All right, we're starting with the cross-examination from the defense attorney. We're not going to look at every single question here. I'm just going to analyze the statements that are relevant, and we'll see whether he's answering the most important questions truthfully or deceptively. You can tell when those live rounds came back to your place, and Kenny says, "I've never been able to identify the exact date." Well, we know that's a lie. He uses the word never. Most likely, he was probably storing the live rounds in his van. He probably just left them in his van after the shooting thing and just never brought them in. He brought them into PDQ on the 11th. That's the date in question. That's when the crime happened. And he knows that if he says that he brought the live rounds in on that date, it's going to directly link him using those rounds to sabotage Hannah. So he's not willing to give you that information under any circumstances. Okay, so in reality, you drove them back from 1883 and you can't remember that day at all. So the defense attorney's getting a little miffed here. And he says, "No, I ballpark it, but it's not accurate. I have an idea of within months or two, or even, did you know, I can't tell you because I made at least 2 trips back and forth from Texas to Albuquerque, California. Back again. It's just not been able to narrow it down." First off, before we go into the indicators, we have word salad here, right? This is a jumble. And the reason that we get this jumble is because he's trying to edit. This is normal, not just him. Everybody does this. If you did something really wrong and you're in the middle of being asked about that point in time that's going to incriminate you, remember we talked about that process where the language part of your brain is just going to send the truth to the front of your brain here so that you can analyze it, swap in some deception if you need to, change a couple of words and get it out of your mouth. Now you can change one word pretty quickly. We're talking a tenth of a second, half of a second, something like that. If you have to start searching through your deception thesaurus in order to fix what your brain dictionary sent to you, I'm calling a brain dictionary because it has the exact correct definition of every word, and it picks the word that is the right accurate word and sends that to your frontal lobe. And then at that point, that's when you need to say, "Oh, I can't say that word, so let's change it." And you pull out your deception thesaurus and start looking for words that you can plug in there. So that's common for everybody. Everybody does that. But once you get to a point where you have to change a bunch of words and you're trying to respond to a question and he's trying to multitask. We talked about this in the last video. It's not possible to multitask. So it's not possible to recall a memory and create a new memory at the same time. Your body literally won't let you do that. Your eyes have to look in a certain direction. For most people, they're looking to the left when they're recalling a memory, and they look to the right when they're fabricating. With Kenny, it's the opposite. He looks directly forward. He looks straight forward when he's recalling. When he's fabricating, he looks hard left, and then as soon as he's done with saying what he needs to say, his eyes go hard right. And it's almost like he's trying to recover from that lie. That being said, when he's in the process of trying to replace a bunch of words and his mind is both looking at the memory of what happened in the past and he's trying to fabricate simultaneously, your eyes can't look in both directions at the same time. You can't recall a memory and fabricate simultaneously. On top of that, he's trying to look a sentence ahead. He's trying to play chess, but he doesn't have the equipment. You cannot say what you need to say and replace the truthful words with deceptive words in the sentence that you're speaking, and also begin to change the words that are truthful into deceptive words in the next sentence that's coming. Your brain gets too scattered as his attention is getting divided. He starts to say something and then he realizes that doesn't make sense. I can't end this sentence. There's nothing that I can put at the end of this sentence that's going to make any sense. So he just terminates it and starts again. So you end up with things like, have an idea of within months or two or even end of sentence. Did you know I can't tell you because I made at least 2 trips back and forth from Texas to Albuquerque, California. End of sentence, back again. End of sentence. You get word salad. And it's a massive indicator that the person is deceptive everywhere. They literally can't create a coherent sentence because of how much deception they're trying to put into the statement. Now let's look at things individually here. We've got I, repeating. So he starts out right away, immediately out of the gate. You know that he is in this stumbling process where he's trying to edit too much. I ballpark it, but it's not. So we have, again, stumbling of words, accurate. He's trying to figure out what exactly to say here. I. So we have repeating I's again. Have an idea of within months. And now he's trying to figure out what time frame can I give you that's not going to incriminate me. And it has nothing to do with reality, nothing to do with the truth. It has to do with what information can I give to mislead you in a way that is going to not incriminate me. So he says an idea of within months or 2 or even, and he's going to blow this up to some huge number. And he realizes that doesn't make any sense. I can't say
ballpark it, but it's not accurate. I have an idea of within months or 2 or even I can't tell you because I made at least 2 trips back and forth.
I can't say or even a year because this was only a few months ago, and his brain got overwhelmed and he terminated the sentence. And then he says, "Did you know I can't tell you?" Because he says, "I can't tell you." That means he has the information and there's something preventing him from telling you. The phrase "I can't tell you" is the opposite of the phrase "I can't remember." What can be confusing to people is it uses the word "can't" in there. That's the core of both of those statements. "I can't remember" starts with a positive and then ends with the part of that phrase that is going to be negative in your eyes. "I can't" is a truthful statement. I have the information and I'm not going to give it to you. It's just that he's on the witness stand and he has to give the information. So it comes across as a deceptive statement, but in reality, literally what he's telling you is the truth. He's telling you, I have the information and I'm not going to give it to you. The deception is not always a literal 100% misrepresentation of reality in the words that you're saying. Sometimes it's a misrepresentation of what you're willing to give or what the motive is behind the information that you're giving. Right. Did you know I can't tell you, because we have an explanatory word in here that's preceded by a negative statement. So we have deception here. We also know that we have deception from and we have deception in a way that is extremely emotionally sensitive for him. So we're talking about live ammo here. And all of this makes sense with what we know. I made at least 2 trips back, and now he's just mumbling word salad to try to give enough information to have that person move on so that that person registers, I received a response, even if it wasn't the response that I wanted, not registering that it wasn't a response that made sense. He's just trying to get out of this question. All right, this is a lie. He knows exactly when he brought them into the PDQ facility. We also know that he is not willing to say it under any circumstances, which means he ties bringing the live rounds into his facility directly to criminal activity. We've talked about this before, and that's because he brought them in on the 11th so that he could use them to commit the crime. And that is so directly tied in his mind that he's not willing to tell you when he brought them in. And for some reason, he's not willing, not for some reason, it's hard to lie. If he would have said right away, I brought those in the day that I brought them back, the day we went shooting, which for them was like 3 months before. And I brought them back, I put them right in the bathroom. Nobody would have asked him another question about it. But he was probably thinking other people have used the bathroom. Somebody might testify against me and say that there weren't any rounds in there. He made the decision that he just wasn't going to tell them. And he was going to stand by the story that he just can't remember the day. And that ended up getting him probably in more trouble than if he would have just lied about it. When you were with Detective Hancock, one of these times, did you sit down with a calendar and try to look at your trip receipts, look at any kind of credit cards and try to figure this out? The defense attorney doesn't want to let this go for good reason. He knows there's something about this. Everybody in the world knows that there's a huge problem here. They just need him to say it. We don't. We've figured out But in court, the attorney needs to get the truth out of him. And unfortunately, just asking these questions over and over again is not going to eventually get the truth. That's what interrogation is about. So unless you can interrogate them, you're not going to be able to get the truth. He says, yes, repeatedly. I've probably tried 3 to 5 times to see if I can come up with a picture of either the space in, PDQ space in Albuquerque, or something that would indicate when I had brought those back. I've just been unable to. Okay. So we've got I've, repeating I, probably tried 3 to 5 times. When you get a repeating I, it means you're editing the sentence. You're currently editing. When you get the repeating I, it means you're trying to sound like you're committed to what you're saying, and you start by saying I, and you haven't decided exactly how you're going to lie yet. So you get the repeating I, as your brain is trying to fabricate. So I've probably tried 3 to 5 times. When he repeats the I's, he's trying to figure out how many times he can say that he tried to figure it out that sounds reasonable. I've probably tried 3 to 5 times to see if I can come up with a picture of either the space in, PDQ. What does that even mean? He's trying to come up with a picture of the space. Those are words that don't make sense. So in his mind, he's replacing too many words, and they're leaking out before he can settle on the right word. In Albuquerque, something that would indicate when I had brought those back. Okay, so what's the problems here? This is all nonsense. He wants to come up with a picture of the space. Plus, he says, I can come up with a picture of either the space in, PDQ space in Albuquerque, and then there's no or. So his mind is going off on all kinds of tangents that he's terminating here, and he's not following up on them because there's no memory there. As he's trying to fabricate, he's trying to give you options. I was trying to either do this or, wait, dang, that doesn't make any sense. Let me terminate that one. What was I trying to do here? All as he's speaking in real time. So we get an either but no or, and then, hello, Freud, I've been able to. So he says, and I'll show you the video as soon as we're done here doing the analysis. He says, I've been unable. So you can only say what you're thinking. And oftentimes you say either exactly what you're thinking, which is the truth, or you say a word that is coming up after. And then we get
go back and when you were sitting down with Hancock in one of these times and sit down with the calendar and try to look at your trip receipts, look at any kind of credit card, try to figure that out?
Yes, repeatedly. I've probably tried 3 to 5 times to see if I can come up with a picture of either the space in PDQ space in Albuquerque, something that would indicate when I had brought those back. I've just been unable to.
Okay.
And then we get the repeating I's. So this whole thing is deceptive, and we beat this horse to death because he keeps getting asked this question and he keeps lying about it. Why would you store live ammo at PDQ at all? Okay, well, I've got, now we're into immediate huge sensitivity because he actually used the word live ammo. Before he was talking about live ammo, but the defense attorney didn't use the word live ammo in the question. So we get once, even though he's talking about when he brought the live ammo in. Now he says, why would you store live ammo in PDQ at all? That's accusatory. And Mr. Kenney does not take accusatory questions well. It puts him under a tremendous amount of stress. As an interrogator, if and when they interrogate him in the future, just ask direct questions and then follow up on those direct questions because it puts him under a tremendous amount of stress. So, well, I've got, self-defense ammunition, it's Albuquerque after all, and that's enough right there. And, I deal with weapons that should not be out on the street, and I'll do what I have to prevent that from happening. Unfortunately, that's an unfortunate reality. All right. I deal with weapons that shouldn't be out on the street. Let's look at this first statement. Self-defense ammunition. That sounds like something that could be plausible. So he chose to throw that out there. For self-defense, everybody has one particular firearm. And that firearm and that ammunition is going to be in a specific place so you know exactly where it is. If you're truly concerned about self-defense, it's going to be on your hip. If you just generally want something there to protect your property, something that you can get to quickly, it's going to be in a location you can get to quickly. It's going to be ready to go so that you can pull it out and you know how to use it. You know how to take the safety off. Everything is just automatic for you. Anybody who spends their life working with firearms is not going to pick up a random firearm in a life or death situation with aged timepiece ammunition and use that for self-defense. They're just not going to do that. It just doesn't make sense. To anybody who knows about firearms, that answer right there makes no sense whatsoever. But then he continues with generalities, and they make less and less sense as he goes. So he says, it's Albuquerque after all, and that's enough right there. He's trying to do this funny insinuation Albuquerque's a rough town, which is a meaningless statement. It's Albuquerque. That doesn't mean anything. It's Albuquerque. And I deal with weapons. I was laughing out loud when I read this the first time. I want to be as professional as I possibly can be in here, but sometimes things are just so funny. You just have to acknowledge how funny it is. He sells firearms. So he buys and sells firearms and ammunition. Yeah, he found that prop firearms, real firearms with blanks is the most profitable for him, but he's a firearms dealer. And he says, I deal with weapons that should not be out on the street. I got nothing. It's too funny. Anyways, why did he say it? He was just pulling common phrases. All of his answers there are just common phrases that he thinks will work in order to get the attention off of this question and onto the next one. He uses 3 times in here. Once you determine that it's deception, you then have to go back. You have to take that information and use it. Don't just determine, he was lying there, right? You have to go back and say, okay, what was he lying about? How does the truth fit into the big picture? So I've got, self-defense ammunition. There are certain circumstances where when a person is deceptive, we don't know exactly what the truth is. But when we get into this end, sometimes it's directly accusatory, sometimes it's indirectly accusatory. But even if it's indirectly accusatory, there is an action that you are either guilty of or not. Any deception here is extremely dangerous for him at this point because we know exactly what it's being deceptive about. There's no possible alternatives. When he says, self-defense ammunition, and it's not self-defense ammunition, and then we get 2 generic phrases after that are both diversion tactics. So it's Albuquerque after all, and I deal with weapons that shouldn't be out on the street. Those are just diversionary statements. Always remember the question. When he's working this hard to make up reasons for having the ammo at PDQ, then the real reason is being strongly withheld. This tells me that there was only one reason in his mind to bring the ammo back, and that was to prep it for sabotaging Hannah. If there was any truthful, innocent alternative, he would have used that. So the fact that he didn't use anything else means it can only be the thing that he's accused of. There is self-defense ammunition, and the remnants of the 1883 cowboy training camp was there. That's the question. And again, here's the answer. So again, the defense attorney he's stating that the ammo was in his shop. He is walking him towards putting that ammo into the dummy rounds. And Seth Kenney is well aware of where this is walking to. The question is, so there is self-defense ammunition and the remnants of the 1883 cowboy training camp was there. And the answer is, and I, again, don't know the date that I brought them back. He can't argue with the fact that it was there. He's already said that it was there, that it was in a box in the bathroom. The only thing that he can do at this point is to continue to say that I don't know when it got there. Now, that's actually irrelevant because it doesn't matter if it had been in the bathroom for 2 months, 3 months, 5 years, or if he brought it back that day. The fact is it was there and it was available. It gives him the means, no matter when he brought it back. But if he admits the date that he brought it back, it shows what his intended purpose for it was. Moving on to the next one. Do you recall telling Detective Hancock when you were interviewed with her that you had given a number of prime cases to Sarah, and it will be interesting to see what color primers they have? All right,
this also include what's called primed cases?
No, prime cases would not be, because one is a consumable, the other one is a rental, and prime cases would be a consumable.
What is a primed case?
A prime case is simply that.
Do you recall telling Detective Hancock when you interviewed with her that you had given a number of prime cases to Sarah, and it will be interesting to see what color primers they have?
Well, it's interesting because it says prime cases, and that I would have said primed. I never say prime cases. It just sounds like you're ordering some off of Amazon. So I don't recall that conversation. I don't even know what I'm referring to.
Right, this is his police interview, the one that's online. Everyone's seen it. He's probably watched it himself. Everything in that police interview is going to be burned into his mind. That is, for one thing, police interviews are not something that you forget very easily. There's no reason that he wouldn't remember any of this. And he can always say, I don't really remember exactly what I said there. Can I see the transcript? If an innocent person is asked a detail and they want to be truthful and they want to be accurate and they can't remember exactly what they said, they would agree with them. Yes, I said something like that, but I would really like to be able to state or restate my answer exactly. Do you have that transcript so that I can look at what I said? But that's not what he says. He says, well, it's interesting because it says prime cases and that I would have said primed. I never say prime cases. That just sounds like ordering something off Amazon. So I don't recall that conversation. I don't even know what I'm referring to in that conversation. Okay, fixating on a random word is the least sophisticated way of evading a question. Your brain has not just a limited amount of focus in the moment, but you have a limited amount of focus over a period of time. Your brain runs out of energy. You cannot deceptively answer direct questions and come up with responses that sound legitimate. You just can't do that for an extended period of time, not in a sophisticated way. And what he's doing is getting more and more childish. It's getting more and more simple. Not that his deceptions were complex before, but eventually he's going to get to the point where he's like, you know what, I'm just not going to answer your question, because he's tired of thinking and he is just running out of energy. So fixating on a word like this, because it says prime cases and that I would have said primed, it's complete and total evasion. It's just not willing to even acknowledge the question in a very childish way. And then the fact that he uses never means he probably does say primed cases, and he's aware of the fact that he says prime cases. We have an explanatory plus a negative, so I don't recall that conversation. That's a lie. Repeated I 3 times. He says, I'm not, I don't. So I is what we have here, repeated 3 times. And then we want to not forget the question. That's the last thing I wrote in here is let's go back and look at the question again. We get so much of this going around in circles. The idea is that you forget the question and you move on. Do you recall telling Detective Hancock when you interviewed with her that you had given a number of prime cases to Sarah, and that it will be interesting to see what color primers they have? There is a link to what type of primer, what color the primer is, to who gave that ammunition to the set. And he does not want that correlation to be made. He is trying to start his answer out in left field and then drive into the parking lot from there.
Do you recall stating that chances are they'll all have the same color primer?
This conversation, I just don't remember the particulars of this conversation with.
But do you recall at all, regardless of the conversation, that Sarah Zachary had primed cases on the set of Rust?
If they're on the invoice and it's a dummy, or excuse me, it's a blank round, and I would include a primed case in a blank round invoice, because again, it's a consumable. I would not be surprised if they got prime case blanks, let's call them blank.
And we'll move to the next question here. But do you recall at all, regardless of the conversation, that Sarah Zachary had primed cases on the set of Rust? If they're on the invoice and it's a dummy, or excuse me, it's a blank round, and I would include a primed case in a blank round invoice because again, it's a consumable. I would not be surprised if they got prime case blanks, let's call them. Okay, so there's lots of repetition in the words. That's clearly deceptive. But what's important in this statement is that he accidentally says dummy twice. What he's telling you here is that he's not going to tell you. He's going to make you look it up and see if you can find out of his handwritten paper invoices, if you can figure out which one is going to pin him giving those primed cases, those prime cases. He actually says prime right here. He says, if they got prime case blanks, let's call them, after he just gave you the Amazon answer. Remember, we've got Freud at work in his mind here when he says it's on an invoice, and then he wants to tell you that it's going to be on a blank invoice because it has primer in it and it goes bang. He lumps those with blanks. He thinks that makes sense, so he wants you to go look at all the invoices for blanks so that you don't find it. And he says, and it's a dummy, or excuse me, it's a blank round, and I would include a primed case in a blank round invoice. His mind is so tired at this point that he's having trouble even replacing the very clear words. It's not like he has 50 words that he's trying to replace at one time now. It's just one word and he's having trouble replacing it. And he's distancing himself from the primed blank rounds because he knows those are going to tie directly back to him. The rounds that went to 1883 came back at some point to your place. Some of those reloaded rounds from Joe Swanson.
And these were reloads, and some percentage of them were Starline brass reloads. Is that correct?
Yes, I think I would just guess a good percentage, roughly 50% of the cases were Starline.
And these were reloads, and some percentage of them were Starline brass reloads. Is that correct?
Yes, I think I would just guess a good percentage, roughly 50% of the cases were Starline.
Deflection and distancing were Starline brass. So the 1883 Cowboy Camp Training Camp, just to be specific, yes, some of those Thale Reed, Joe Swanson reloads, again, deflecting and distancing, came back to PDQ in Albuquerque. This is deflecting the blame to Joe Swanson and Thale Reed, so that when everything ties back to him, he can say, well, it also ties back to these guys, and these guys give ammo to, well, he's trying to directly say Thale Reed. So he says Thale Reed makes his own stuff and gets his stuff from Joe Swanson and would have gotten on set through Hannah. So even if it ties back to me, it also ties back to them. Is what he's saying. Except that a truthful person would just say that directly. They would say, yes, I use those. Those are the standard. Joe Swanson makes all of them. Everybody sells them. It's going to tie back to all of us. That a truthful person is not afraid to put themselves in the mix there. You said because it is dangerous when an armorer is trying to figure out, maybe in a high-speed environment, and you're trying to distinguish between a live round and a dummy, it doesn't rattle. Didn't you describe that as being a dangerous situation? Ooh, this is actually his motive. We started to identify that in the last video. Seth Kenney wants everyone to only use dummy rounds that rattle. And it seems like his competitors are using rounds that rattle less and less. The reason for that he gives is because on set, they're saying that the rattling can interfere with the sound. So he wants to position himself as being the only safe vendor. This is a restatement of his motive, which is going to make him nervous, even though it is literally what he exactly said. And when a truthful person makes a statement and then that statement is reiterated back, didn't you say this? Truthful person is going to say, yes, that is what I said because that's the truth. I mean, they're not going to say it like that. They're going to say, yes, it is dangerous. That's it. Okay, side note, this is common. Almost anybody who commits a crime is going to state their motive at some point in their statement. It's almost all the time in open statements, but I've found that even on the witness stand, when they're being asked direct questions, at some point they're still going to get their motive in there. It is being told back to him in the form of a question here. Well, certainly, because it's like a firearm that you can't check it is unloaded. You have to assume that it's loaded or that the round is live and it's not a dummy round. So we have an explanatory plus a negative statement. Because it's like a firearm that you can't check, is it unloaded? He's stumbling all over this sentence. There shouldn't be deception here. This is his own statement. And the question is, did you say this? We shouldn't have any problem here. So we have deception. The statement itself is factual, which means the deception is not in the facts, but in the meaning. This indicates to me that he intentionally wanted to make the Joe Swanson rounds not rattle. Kenney may have soaked his dummies in the patina chemical to oxidize the lead buckshot that Joe Swanson switched to in order to make the dummies be very difficult to hear them rattle. This could have been to make people lose trust in Joe Swanson's business, which could open up market space for Kenney to produce dummy rounds. Also, he wanted to hurt Hannah's credibility by making her look like she can't tell the difference between dummy rounds, real rounds, because if she rattles them and they already have that lead buck shot in there that's more muffled, if he patinas that to the point where it gets that thick oxidized coating around the lead buckshot, then when you rattle it, it has a buffer, as he calls it, this gel in there that he put on it. Let's see. Also, he wanted to hurt Hannah's credibility by making her look like she can't tell the difference between dummies and live rounds. Kenney's plan was to have Hannah shut down shooting. This is my opinion, because we know at this point he put the live rounds in. So why? This question is about motive. So I'm going to discuss his motive. I think the way he envisioned this is with Hannah having difficulty determining if something is rattling or not. If it has a very, very faint, a very light rattle, then she would have to stop. She would have to slow everybody down and say, I'm having trouble determining if this is a dummy round or not. And that would make her look. Kenny's plan was to have Hannah shut down shooting. Everyone would find live rounds all over the set. Kenny would point to the rounds coming from Thale and going through Hannah to get on the set. Both his competitors, who are close to retirement, would be seen as not understanding the current movie environment, and Kenny would step into the newly open market space. Hannah's career would be over forever. So imagine.
When you find out, and I don't want to get into what Mr. Swanson told you, but when you find out whatever you find out on the phone, you say shit, shit, shit twice. Why did you say that?
I think I was worried that it was going to be some of these rounds that Thale had given to Troy Teskey and had been using, to shoot, right? Shooting live rounds, that somehow they migrated in some of Thale's leather or, through Hannah in some way, and that, again, we were going to be here saying Joe Swanson live ammunition when he's primarily 99.9% of the time he just provides movies and television shows with blanks and dummy rounds, and that's an uncomfortable situation for Joe Swanson.
So you just gave a long explanation, and you just kind of tried to blame Hannah in that, didn't you, just now?
How did I do that?
Well, you gave the implication that you were worried that this was going to be some that Thale had and Troy was shooting. And again, that's to try to link it to Hannah, isn't it?
So imagine you're an armorer and you're on set and you're shaking the dummy rounds and you can't hear the rattle because the lead buckshot is so heavily oxidized from the chemical that it doesn't rattle anymore. She would be having difficulty picking up round after round, being able to hear them. She would have to eventually stop and say, I have to check these rounds. And once all the focus goes on to her, why is she shutting this down? Is she incompetent? Does she not know what she's doing? And then all of a sudden they find live ammo in there. And once the live ammo ties back to everybody, keep in mind that Seth Kenney did not think that there was going to be a full investigation that was going to turn his shop and his life upside down. He was thinking that nobody would have any idea that he had those live rounds, that he had taken those live rounds back from the cowboy training camp. Remember, in his mind, as long as nobody mentions those rounds, it was Hannah's father, Thale, who was the one who had those reloads. So everyone would automatically think that they went from Thale to Hannah. Hannah put live rounds out all over the set, and boom, that's it. That's the end of Thale. That's the end of Hannah forever. And then it would call Joe Swanson's business into question about why is he putting buckshot in there, especially if it can oxidize. It would make him look bad. He's close to retirement. He might just get out of the game. And bam, there's this wide open market for Seth Kenney to step into and become the big prop guy. I think that was his plan. Okay, you were asked if after this October 16th accidental discharge, you had an argument with Ms. Gutierrez-Reed. Do you recall that? And he says, by text message, yes. And do you recall after that you wanted to fire Ms. Gutierrez-Reed? And he says, it wasn't that I wanted her fired because, so we have right out of the gate, we have a negative statement with an explanatory. It wouldn't be for me to fire her. So now we have negative, explanatory, negative. She can tell me to go to hell all day long, and it wouldn't make a difference to the Rust production. He doesn't say it wouldn't make a difference to him, which is what he was insinuating. He's saying she can call me names all day long, but the fact that he can't say the words that it wouldn't affect him means that he's getting emotionally spun up again right here, and he can't actually say the words. So he says to the Rust production. Then he says, it doesn't, So he is spun at this point, and he is back into full-fledged, I've got 5 sisters and 2 daughters. I'm used to it. So if Rust Production is happy, and they were, Sarah Zachary said she's a great armorer that I've seen. She, the defendant, Hannah, she sent me the text message that the director had sent her after a big shootout on blank ammo, big shootout. And the defense attorney is like, stop. And the last thing I wrote is, he's trying his best to get to the 9 lines to prove to everybody that he's being deceptive, but he gets cut off. So, Mr. Kenney, my question was pretty simple. You just testified that you did not want to fire Hannah. Is that your testimony? And he says, it's not that I wanted her fired. So think about what he just said there. It's not that I wanted her fired. She was doing a horrible job at props. That was an issue. What would a truthful person say here if they didn't want to get her fired, or if they had mixed feelings, if they were debating whether she should be fired? If there's debate in your own mind, you have to balance that. If you're saying it's not that I wanted her fired, what you're saying is that she's done something bad, but she's also done a lot that's really good. And right now I'm trying to see how this balances out. We had this little blowout. I had mixed feelings about it, is what he's trying to insinuate. What he's saying is that I didn't want her fired because I wanted her to have an outcome that was much worse than that. I wanted this whole scenario with the live rounds to play out so that it would destroy her career forever. That's what's going on in his head. And he says, it's not that I wanted her fired. She was doing a horrible job. So he should have followed that up with a positive comment. Okay, you answered my question. I just want to know. He interrupts him and says, I had mixed feelings about it. And I think that's why, in fact, I reached out to 2 common friends with Thale saying, this is the situation, And so we just have, it's almost like he wasn't able to soothe himself by saying, in the last question. So he had to cut the defense attorney off so that he could finish his answer here and get out everything that he needed to get out. Do you recall stating that she was just being an idiot? I wanted Sarah to get rid of her. He says, collectively, yes. I mean, even now, frustrated with her, but same time, understand. Well, what she's up against. So it's a mixed bag of emotions and ultimately was not my call. So we have all the knows. He says frustrated because it didn't go as planned. He is frustrated. What he's trying to imply is that he was frustrated with her. Not, I didn't want her fired. I was frustrated with her. That's the way a truthful person would say it if it were the truth. But he says, even now, frustrated with her. So why is he even now frustrated with her? Because things didn't go as planned. He had a plan, and the plan didn't involve Helena's death. The plan involved him being able to sneak the live rounds in, end her career. She disappears, and he's king of the castle. And it didn't go as planned. So he's now, which is what he says, he's now frustrated with her. There's missing eyes in here, which means that what it sounds like he's saying is not what he actually means, which is why there's the missing eye. And then the mixed emotions is because he's scared he's going to get in trouble, even though her career is over. So there's the mixed emotions. He's happy that she did end up getting in trouble, but he's not happy of where he sits, which is on a witness stand. Sir, my question was, did you remember stating that? So because he has gotten to the point where I guess he's just turned on the spigot and he's just letting words flow at this point, even though they're nonsense. And so the defense attorney has to cut him off. All right, last question here. Now, do you also recall in the July 11th interview stating, well, I wasn't going to work with her again in the future, so you wanted her fired? Now he says, yeah, I just, again, there were some mixed emotions. And in this situation, if I really wanted her fired, I could have gotten her fired. There's a couple of things. He could have been saying that he would just not work on a film where she was the armorer, which is what he should have said. Because he didn't say that, I have to assume that that's not the truth. Because if he said that, nobody would have asked any more questions. That would have been fine. That would have been an okay response. But because that's not what he said, you have to assume that he either wanted her fired or worse. So when the defense attorney said, so you wanted her fired, the easiest thing for him to do here would have just been to have said, yeah, that is what I wanted. I wanted her fired. Well, there were some mixed emotions. So he's not willing to admit that. And it appears to me that when he says he wasn't going to work with her again in the future, sounds to me like he may have already decided at that point that he was going to sabotage her somehow. He may not have had a plan in place yet, like the details of a plan. He may not have had a timeline yet, but at that point, he had probably decided that he, being the one who supplies her with ammunition, there's going to be some opportunity where he can make her look bad, slip up, and then just have the film industry ban her. So that's what I think. So this is our analysis. The cross-examination is just riddled with very poor attempts at deception on Seth Kenney's part. It just helps us to confirm everything that we've thought already. Now you get the context of why, as I was going through this, I was like, oh my God, like there's the live ammo is causing this emotional distress. And that's how I was able to put everything together. It's very clear. There's not a shadow of a doubt in my mind that Kenney had been planning this when the opportunity came up. He had the rounds that looked identical to the dummy rounds. He had them in his van. He may have been holding them in his van for this purpose, so that when the opportunity came up to give rounds to them, dummy rounds to them, he could mix them in. So he may have had this plan in place for a long time. He just needed them to ask for dummy rounds. Now that I'm thinking about this, why we have that conversation I am literally this just occurred to me. We had a blowout fight here on October 5th. Why did Seth Kenney bring this up? Remember when I think this was the second video, when I made this, the topic of conversation here is that the set of Rust is leasing rounds from him. And he decided to tell Hannah that she needed to pay for or replace any lost dummy rounds, even though that had never been mentioned before. And she was like, you expect me to go walk out there and look for dummy rounds and count everything up? She got upset. Now it makes sense. The reason why he mentioned that is to make her go out there and count all of the rounds and then put in another order for dummy rounds so that he could mix in the live rounds. So he actually started this way back, which would be why you see all the you knows here. So, wow. It did come together quite nicely, actually. But yeah, I think we have quite a few indicators that this was premeditated. So now that we know that, I think it's very clear. Everything has come together like a puzzle. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this. This was a long ride. It was interesting. Man, I love this. Anytime I have an opportunity to find somebody who committed a serious crime, who's still free and on the street, anything I can do to help point the police in the right direction, that's what I live for. So let me know what you think about the whole case. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to do on this case. That pretty much wraps up Seth Kenney. I am going to look at Hannah. That will be my next series here. Hope you enjoyed this. Like and subscribe and keep seeking the truth for yourself and keep tuning into my channel. This is Truth Revealed signing off.